Alright guys, Murphs here, and today I want to talk about the material used in the construction of different types of shot. Now, this is actually kind of important because there are a variety of shot types out there, not even just talking about size or any of those types of things, buckshot versus number 5 shot or anything along those lines. We've done a completely different discussion on that already. However, talking about the difference between lead and steel and other types of material utilized to be able to make individual pieces of shot is kind of important because you need to have a better understanding of what it is that you're getting into whenever you utilize that type of shot and what it can and can't be used with. Now, to start off with, lead shot is the baseline. That is the standard that shotgun shot was originally constructed around. That was what was used for a century before there started to be some issues with it. What was discovered was that lead was actually causing lead poisoning in waterfowl, and this was causing issues with the population. So there started in 1976 to be a lot of bans on where it was that you could use lead shot ammunition. By the 1990s, it became a straight up federal ban to be able to, in the United States, to be able to hunt waterfowl with lead shot. In Europe, a lot of those places, a lot of different countries in Europe are still basing it off of where it is that you're around, like not shooting lead shot around a water source or anything along those lines. But even with those restrictions, this has caused a lot of European hunters to go away from utilizing any type of toxic shot. So, the issue with that is that with lead being the basis for so much shotgun ammunition, lead has certain parameters or aspects of it that are difficult to replicate with other metals, and specifically it is density. Lead is a very dense metal, which means that you get a lot of energy for the velocity that you're able to impart onto lead shot, which gives it a specific performance dynamic that, especially when you're talking about making the jump over from non-toxic or from toxic lead to non-toxic lead, hunters and manufacturers have been trying to be able to replicate those ballistics ever since. Now, the most readily available non-toxic shot out there is steel shot. It's relatively inexpensive. It's widely available from a ton of different sources. It's very easy to come across and be able to utilize. But the problem with steel shot is it's not as dense as lead. So you might be able to get more velocity out of it, but you do not necessarily get more energy. You don't get more penetration or any of those types of things. So a lot of times, hunters find that they have to go up 1 or 2 sizes from the lead shot that they would normally use whenever they switch over to steel shot, which then means that it diminishes the overall amount of shot in the individual load that they're firing, which negatively impacts not just their pattern, but also their hit opportunities. So this has caused a lot of people to shy away from using steel shot. So with that being the case, what do they switch to? Now, something else I want to throw out there with steel shot before we get over to the next type of shot material is that steel shot can be very damaging to a non-steel proofed barrel. So a lot of the older pre-1970s or 1960s developed shotguns do not necessarily hold up to steel shot well for long-term use. Now, with that being the case, what do a lot of hunters wind up turning towards if they don't want to use steel shot, or if they want to hunt with, Papaw's old 12 gauge and they don't necessarily want to damage it? They want it to be around for their children and their children's children to be able to appreciate as well. So what a lot of guys start looking at this point is called bismuth. Now, bismuth shot is made up of 91% bismuth and 94% bismuth and about 6% tin, and it is very dense and has some great patterning aspects that are involved with it, and great energy and penetration and all that kind of stuff in relative terms with shotgun shot, which is not terribly great for penetration to begin with. The issue with bismuth is that it's kind of expensive. Like, we're talking well over $1 a round for bismuth ammunition. Now, there are some other things that people will talk about with lead shot, and that'll be a tendency for it to not necessarily always be perfectly round. This is actually a problem that you're going to find in all shot types. They're not so beautifully precise in their machining or development that they are perfectly round. It's quite frequent for them to be a little oblong or perhaps have like a small tail coming off of it or something like that. Maybe a taper to the overall shape. They are roughly round, and this is where patterning really comes in. Now, bismuth performs just fine in older shotguns, and it has excellent ballistic characteristics to it, but there is one major issue, and that is that it has a tendency to shatter when it strikes bone or other hard masses. So this can be very infuriating. If you've ever eaten something that was shot with shotgun shot, already it's kind of annoying to have to pick out individual bits of shot. Now imagine that those individual bits of shot had become shards. You could see where this would potentially be problematic to somebody wanting to eat the food that they shot. So what's another option that's out there on the market? Well, some people turn to tungsten. Now, tungsten is a very hard and dense metal. And generally, tungsten in a military type sense is used in like armor-piercing rounds for tanks. That gives you an idea of how hard tungsten is. Now, tungsten does not become a good option to put into older shotguns that are not proofed for steel. Because if steel is going to pick away at it, tungsten most definitely is going to do the same. However, it performs very well, it patterns very well. But you come into the same expense issue of well over $1 a round. And an issue that you find with steel and a lot of these other heavy, brittle, dense shots is that they may not necessarily perform very well in tighter choke tubes. You might run into an issue with full chokes, and you most definitely need to check with the manufacturer of any extra full chokes as to whether or not they will actually be able to handle that type of shot. So it's important to be able to check your manuals on those types of things. Now, there's also another derivative of tungsten shot that is known as Hevishot. And the idea is that you take a composite type of shot. So it's like a single piece is like 51% tungsten, and then other copper and other metals are introduced as well in order to be able to give it greater density, greater resistance to wind changes and all that kind of stuff, penetration on target, while maybe reducing some of the wear and tear on the individual barrel. Now, again, when you're talking about expense and all that kind of stuff, that's where steel wins, and that's why so many people use steel to begin with. But when it comes to actually making reliable kills on waterfowl, steel has some major issues with its lack of energy and relatively, high velocities but low energy transfer. So with that being the case, if this is the balancing act that you're trying to take whenever you're talking about waterfowl hunting or the use of any of these types of shot, what, in your opinion, Murph, do you think you should be looking for? What is something that should push someone over into buying or spending the money on tungsten or bismuth or Hevishot? Well, to me, a lot of it comes down to purpose. So the expense type aspect of it is very difficult to be able to not cite as an issue because money's a factor. Because that money is going to is going to directly correlate to how much time you can spend on the range patterning your shot, practicing with your shotgun under that particular load. Those are very important things. I really push, for the most part, not necessarily to be able to utilize the same ammunition, but something that performs in a very similar manner. So in to break this out into other discussions here, in pistol ammunition, I don't think it's important that you have to train with your defensive load, because ultimately, as long as it cycles in your pistol, that's all that matters. In my opinion, handguns are not meant for super precise action or super precise shooting. It's not important if I get the exact recoil aspect of it down as long as I'm shooting the same caliber. So if you plan on carrying .357 Magnum, I think it's very important for you to train with .357 Magnum. If you plan on carrying 9mm, then train with 9mm. I don't think you're necessarily going to have a lot of issue as long as cycling is confirmed, as long as function is concerned. That's the key aspect of pistols, is it's a close range option that I need to go bang every time. In rifles, if you're talking about serious use, I do zeroing with my intended fighting and or hunting load, and then I might train with cheaper ammunition, but I still want to come back and confirm zero every once in a while, make sure that everything is still on track with how it is that it's supposed to be. With shotguns, especially since every shotgun is an individual and every shot adds to that individuality, every shot size, every shell type, I would think it would be very important to actually spend a lot of time out on the range working with that particular load. If that becomes cost prohibitive to you, then you may not necessarily be able to stick with bismuth or tungsten or any of those types of options. Now, someone that I think would really benefit from the use of these heavier, non-toxic shots would be perhaps some sort of guide. someone who does guided waterfowl hunts, who might have to make longer shots in order to be able to reliably harvest game for clients, for wounded birds trying to wing away and all that kind of stuff. That would be a fantastic time to invest in that type of ammunition because you have a business that supports the overall expenditure. So you're investing into your business at that point. That's how I would look at that. Yeah, it's going to be expensive, but at the very least, you're making sure that you are providing something to the person who paid you that gets them the experience that they're after. And that's an important thing to keep in mind as a business person and what it is that you're investing. All right, guys. That's pretty much what I got on this particular subject. I hope you guys found this interesting. Nice little short video for you this week. So with that, that's pretty much what I got. Have a good day.